Welcome to the Startup Competitors Podcast, where we talk with early-stage entrepreneurs to understand what information they use to inform product roadmap, strategy, and market differentiation.
Hey there, welcome to the podcast. For those of you in the United States who are listening, I hope you had a relaxing 4th of July and maybe an extended weekend. And for those who are outside of the United States who might be listening, hope you had a great weekend, but you probably didn't have an extended one. Because last week was a holiday week here in the United States, we decided to take the week off ourselves. And so this week, we're going to be doing a rebroadcast. We chose to rebroadcast my interview with Ting Gootee with Elevate Ventures. We first published that episode almost a year ago, a little over a year ago, and it's still one of my favorite episodes. Not only does Ting share a little bit about her background, how she got started in the investment work that she does, but she also walked through the Elevate Ventures process for how they make investment choices, which I thought was super enlightening. And then specific to competition, I think she did a fabulous job breaking down a framework for how she thinks of competition in the market and how they leverage that a little bit in their process at Elevate for what they look at when they look at a founder and a company. And I thought that was super enlightening. And then the rest of the episode is really just her and I going back and forth on which uncovers some really good do's and don'ts for founders who are looking to do fundraising and or have to do a pitch. So if you're at all interested in those topics, this is a good one to give another listen. And if you have any questions about the process and what Elevate does, I'm sure that team would love for you to reach out to them. You can find them at elevateventures.com. Enjoy the episode. We'll be back with new content next week.
Welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Mike Kelly, and today we're sitting with Ting Gootee of Elevate Ventures. She's the Chief Investment Officer. Ting, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the opportunity. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So maybe let's start with a little bit of background on what Elevate is, and what you guys do.
Sure, absolutely. Elevate is an impact investing firm headquartered in Indianapolis. Our investment strategy is focused on pre-seed, seed, and early stage opportunities. We have 7 different investment funds active across those stages of the opportunities, and 5 of them are direct investment funds, and 2 are sort of funds of funds / sidecar programs. So we're very, very active in terms of our investment volume. If not one of the largest, definitely one of the most active in Indiana. In fact, in 2017, we were listed by PitchBook as one of the top 10 global most active seed and early stage investors, and we're the number 1 in the Great Lakes region in terms of deal activity.
How many deals did you guys do last year? Or another way to ask that is how many do you anticipate you'll do this year?
Yeah, typical volume across all different funds are probably around 50 or 60 in total, a good portion of it in pre-seed stage. To give you any kind of a sense of scope or activities, Mike, we since starting our portfolio in 2010, we invested up to this point, which is early 2018, we put about $75 million total, roughly, into almost 270 companies. And they have, all those companies as a result also attracted roughly $500 million in capital from other sources. So it's fairly impactful just from that perspective.
Awesome. And then in my mind, you've always been with Elevate. Have you been with Elevate since 2010?
Yes, great question. Actually, I was with Elevate pre the Elevate days.
Okay.
I was with the team that kind of looked at the model around the country, identified the best practices that laid a foundation to the Elevate model, which the core piece of it is this entrepreneur residence and mentoring, the coaching and advising of the startups at the earliest stage beyond just the capital to work. And I think our advising has a sort of different flavor in the sense that compared to a traditional VC fund, that most of VC funds tend to spend most of their time on their portfolio development after the investment is made. We tend to spend most of our resource on the front end and deal kind of cultivating and nurturing deal flow by mentoring and coaching.
Can you talk about that process a little bit more? So somebody meets an EIR out in the wild, like walk through the process from there to the point that they might be cashing a check.
Sure. As you can imagine, it's a fairly lengthy process, but we try to.
May or may not have gone through it once.
Right, absolutely. So, as I mentioned earlier, our entrepreneur residents, they spend most of their time out in the community interacting with entrepreneurs. We don't call it formal engagement, but it's establish a coaching and mentor relationship with entrepreneurs that can be ongoing for months to some instances, a couple of years. And that kind of leads to getting entrepreneur ready for essentially receiving outside capital. We kind of evolved our investment process over the years, but now the current one is working pretty well. Essentially involves all that coaching and mentoring from the EIRs will ultimately lead to a investment pitch deck that will get vetted to our Monday. We don't call it partner meeting. We call it investment team vetting meeting. And once that's a go, that's essentially the first opportunity for Elevate to take a look at a particular investment opportunity, say it is at a high level right fit with our investment thesis. It's interesting components in here. We want to move it, spend more time on getting to know the entrepreneurs.
Can I ask a quick question on that meeting? So
sure.
Because I'm fascinated and curious. It has nothing to do with competition necessarily.
Yeah.
Is the EIR in that meeting championing the startup, or do you just have a deck and you guys are looking through it and basically making the call of whether or not to move them forward just on the deck alone?
The great question. The answer is both.
Okay.
So we do, every team member look at the deck. The EIR's the company is not in the meeting, so the
Right.
EIR's definitely has an opportunity, what we call a deal sponsor. Deal sponsor will have to be able to answer any questions that might come up. So in a way, it is championing in the sense that they have, most of them, especially for the EIR becoming deal sponsor, they have spent quite a bit of time, have made some investment in time and commitment working with entrepreneurs. I think in a way they were emotionally invested and wanted to see the entrepreneur move forward. Yeah, so there's we try to strike the balance in terms of, I know it's tough, especially for the entrepreneur in residence when they have so much emotional involvement. It's a delicate line between advocating and evaluating.
Yeah.
But everybody, that's why we try to come up with a simple 10 to 12 point checkpoints or scoring points. We call it scoring metrics. So at least give everybody on the same framework to say, this is not about emotional decisions, simply, check, 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 check. Are they fitting the framework? It's been working well so far.
Am I allowed to ask what those 10 or 12 points are?
Yeah. Well, you can, but I don't remember the
themes are good enough.
Yes. The buckets, our entire evaluation process, the buckets of factors are pretty consistent. We deliberately set it up, though, essentially team, market, product, customer, and return. And then we'll have specific criteria under each.
And the return is the forecasted return for Elevate,
right,
based on that deal.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. All right. Jump back to the script. So talk to me a little bit about, as Chief Investment Officer, tell me a little bit about that role and your responsibility. And then I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and what got you to that role.
Sure. My primary responsibility here is managing the entire investment, both on the front end, pipeline management. I don't do so much on the deal sourcing side directly, but I work with the EIRs to make sure the right opportunity gets into our investment pipeline. I'm also responsible in terms of setting up all the investment policy and criteria and process and framework, how we measure our performance as a holistic investment team, as well as conducting diligence and generating diligence report, leading up to the investment committee, hopefully informed decision making. And after the transaction is done, I'm responsible for all the portfolio management activities, including placing folks on boards, monitoring portfolio performance, as well as all the portfolio reporting and valuation activities. I'm not doing it alone. Obviously, we have analysts in our team. We have in-house general counsel, and in parallel, working very closely with EIRs to develop and manage our pipeline.
And how'd you get here?
Oh, I think I'm an accidental entrepreneur or entrepreneur by accident. And really lucky in that way. I grew up in China. Did not grow up thinking I was going to be entrepreneurial. Actually, I was trained in liberal arts. After grad school at Purdue, fell into the hedge fund industry in its heydays. It's a long story how I got there, but spent 3 years there. Really loved. That was really my intro to the finance world. Really loved it.
Was that here or was that in Chicago?
It's a global hedge fund, but it started out by a Purdue guy.
Okay.
And as a result of that, the general counsel was also from Purdue, and he lives here and he operates his entire operations out of Carmel.
Got it.
Of all places, but the main guy is in Toronto. The back office is in London. They have trading desks in Singapore. It's a very global operation, very successful, and they fared well during the financial crisis. But long story short, they really opened my eyes. I loved it, loved the people I work with, and want to stay in the finance, but also know in order for me to do that, coming from a liberal arts background, I got to go brush up on just general business plus number crunching skills. So I went back to Kelly, got my MBA from there. That was right before, I believe, the Great Recession. So the job market and finance started to become a little tough. Ended up taking a summer internship at the 21 Fund at the time. That was still part of the was still managed in-house by a team inside the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. And after the summer internship, the full-time opportunity opened up. I liked the opportunity so much. I liked the team that I worked with so much. I understood and believed in the vision at the time, just to make that pool of resources perhaps better utilized, make a bigger impact. I believe in the mission and vision so much, I decided to stay. So I ended up spending 2 years there and really work with the team, really led to the founding or spin out of Elevate Ventures. Now we're mostly independent entity. Obviously, the government's still our biggest client, but we're an independent entity that's hopefully building our market credibility as a value-added investor, a needed investor here in this marketplace.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
When you're evaluating a deal, how do you think of competition? And that could be as simple as, what are some of the things you're looking for in the competitive landscape, or things that you're not, like red flags, any sort of heuristics around, like either it's when you're looking at that deck for the first time, or when a founder is in the room pitching the things that you're looking to listen for.
Yeah, great question. Coming into this podcast, I try to rewind my memory a little bit, kind of comb through different pitches that we've heard over the years, probably amounts to thousands now. Mike, this is such an important question, yet so few are prepared to answer. I just remember time after time, most people will have, look at standard 12 to 15 slide deck. Most people might have a one slide on competition. Most companies tend to gloss over it, not spending too much time. So inevitably during the Q&A session, we always ask, who is your competition? What is essentially the way I like to look at competition is not so much competition in terms of the technology or competing sellers to the same customer base, but it's more around if there is a problem, that's the underlying assumption, what are the solutions are trying to address that problem? Sometimes it could be nothing, right?
Yeah.
So competition in a sense is also how big is a problem and how urgent is a problem, especially as in healthcare, there's so many problems. How do you get on to the top of the stack that tend to drive a lot of the, at least in my mind, the competition discussions in my head when we're talking about competition. And also when we're looking at the market, we also look at, is it growing? Is it growing? What are some of the headwinds and tailwinds? So when we're doing macro market trend analysis, we tend to look at what's going on in the marketplace. Who else is there? What are the trends? And another thing we tend to look at a lot is, are there any strategic and active VC investment in this space? That way, this kind of, in a way, help us understand the competitive strategy this particular company is pursuing. Are you first to market? That's fine, but are you ready to do the market education, or are you well funded to do so? Or if you're a Me Too or second tier solution, how are we positioned to win? So in a way, it's to me the competition is so much in a standalone case, but how does it correlate to competitive strategy, right? Both in the short term and the long term.
So some of those things that you mentioned, particularly at the end, like if are you first to market, which means you're going to go on an education campaign and that takes time and money. Experiencing that on one of our companies, or what does other funding look like in the space, things like that. How often do you think of the 270 startups you guys have funded? How often, if you're saying no to somebody, do you think it's because of that, right? Like because of something that has to do with the overall market condition, and maybe it is a great idea and maybe it is going to change the world, but you think that either the timing is wrong or the funding is wrong or maybe the strategy is wrong. Like how often would you say a no decision is because of competition, or versus all the other things it could be, the IP, the team, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I would say out of our no's, again, this is just kind of a back of a napkin kind of analysis. Most of the time when we say no, really the top two reasons we say no are team and market. A market, mostly it's around the market opportunity, around competitive, the right timing. Is this particular opportunity position or this particular business position to win? Sometimes the opportunity is right, but you're coming on and say, I'm going to be the next e-commerce site, take on Amazon. You got to better make a really, compelling case why you think that's feasible, right? And a lot of times, in my mind, these two team and market sort of are correlated in a way that, I don't pretend to know everything or be intimately familiar with a variety of market opportunities we're looking at. So to me, it's more a discovery process in terms of how the entrepreneurs get to the conclusion they did. For me, it's more understanding of that process. Have they gone through some validation? I mean, it's more not so much the how, but more the why.
Yeah.
For instance, we see very familiar with this competitive table, the feature set competitive table, right? All the checks and this one has and the competitors don't.
Our column has all of the checks.
Yeah,
they
all
don't.
the checks. And the immediate question I have in my mind is, okay, you come to that conclusion that based on your conversation with the potential customers, or is it just something in your head, right? It's all I think to me is more the underlying work that leading up to either that, the XY chart or a checks table.
Yeah. When you think of the market opportunity, you're talking about let's say we're both holding a coffee cup, right? So let's say I have a new innovation in the coffee cup space. It's going to keep your solar powered coffee cup. It's going to keep your coffee warm longer because you drink so much coffee outside, apparently. I don't know. So if I'm the entrepreneur, right, I want to pitch drinkware as a $50 billion market annually, right? Like I'm going to go for the biggest top line number that I possibly can, which encompasses all drinkware everywhere, not just coffee cups, right? Like that's the classic, this is a $50 billion market opportunity.
Only 2% of that.
Right. So I'm sure you see that all the time. How do you then, or how do the EIRs, because it's probably not you by the time you see it, what is the process of getting to that real number for Elevate? Like whether it's coaching the entrepreneur or the questions that you're asking, how do you figure out what's the real opportunity that's in front of this product?
Yeah, Mike, you're absolutely right. The easier way, as you just described, is a top-down approach. What we always like to see from entrepreneurs is a bottom-up approach, which is what you're thinking you can sell your coffee cups at versus realistically how much you think you can sell. Not everybody's going to buy one. And kind of circle back to the thinking about market size or market competition in general. And in my mind, it's perfectly okay to say our initial set of coffee cups can only sell to this particular customer profile, and that aggregates to a smaller pie. That's an initial entry point. But as long as we're able to articulate future growth opportunities, that's a perfectly acceptable solution. It doesn't have to be a 20 billion market day one. More importantly, how can you carve out a niche, maybe make a beachhead and really, really take a position in the marketplace and grow from there?
I just felt a little tension in me while you said that.
Yeah.
Because there's like this, and maybe this is wrong, so I'll tell you what the tension is, and maybe I'm overthinking it. Like, I feel like as an entrepreneur who's putting together a pitch deck, there's this tension between talking about an iterative go-to-market strategy, right? Like what I mean by that is like, let's say I'm selling to this customer today, and then over the next, because that's the only feature set we can afford to build, right? Then over the next 2 years, we're gonna build these features, which will allow us to sell to this customer, and then we're gonna build these features that allow us to sell to this customer, and then the data is valuable, which allows us to sell to this customer, right? So I'm building this kind of product roadmap that talks about the total kind of vision for the future of this product. Obviously, as an entrepreneur, I need to be doing that. And I would think as an investor, you would want to see that. But I think there's always this fear as the entrepreneur that like, I don't want to signal to Ting or to Elevate that I don't want to signal to them that I'm going to get distracted, right? Like that if I put this future roadmap up there that shows all these other potential customers, especially if those customers might be adjacent to your current customer, not a more sophisticated version. So let's say you're selling to real estate people initially. If you're selling to other types of real estate people, I think that's less of a concern. But like if down the road you think, well, I'm also going to then sell to the banks that provide financing for those deals, and then I'm going to sell to the actual tenants and the banks and the people who own the building, right? So like I always feel like as an entrepreneur, it's sometimes scary to do that, because the last thing I want to send a signal to the investment team or the person who's thinking of investing is we're going to get distracted. We're going to be focusing on 5 customers, not 1 customer, right? Like I almost want it to be the other way, where it's like, no. This is the one thing we're going to do. We're going to do it really well. This is the strategy. We're not going to get distracted from that. Talk a little bit about that and how you try to balance that and the way that you view it.
Yeah, it's interesting you have that perception, because while I was listening to you, what you just described to me actually is a fairly focused stepwise approach, because what you're saying is you're not going out trying to tackle 5 markets or 5 customers all at the same time. You're taking a thoughtful approach in terms of, let's try the real estate first. Then if the bank makes sense, let's go after that. So to me, that's a thoughtful potential growth strategy. Again, I think it goes back to the not the how, but the why, right? As long as you can articulate why there's an opportunity, why it makes sense, why this competitive strategy will enable us to win in the long term, that's defensible.
Yeah.
Versus if you can't articulate the why, that to me is you haven't thought it through. I think the perfect example, some of our companies, I got 2 and it came to mind that I serve on the boards of. The first couple of years, we made a very deliberate decision. Either we're going to go very focused on the channel partners, we're not going to go direct. And for this and this and this and reasons, even though the initial market opportunity just purely based on channel is fairly small, given the resource constraint, the board made a decision and with the management team to say it makes sense, because if you have a channel conflict from day one, you go to direct effort is going to be really tempered. So this whole, it ties back to the competitive strategy situation where we want rather leverage channel, because the channel is not dominating most of the market opportunity versus going against channel at the moment. So that's the why it makes sense, and then enabled the particular focus strategy. Now, in both cases, the 2 or 3 years down the road, all of a sudden the customers are ready to buy direct. Now you say timing is right, and
right.
we have to reinvest in these resources and build the sales and marketing team to tackle the direct to buyer, direct to enterprise opportunities.
Do you have any heuristics around when you look at the competitive landscape for a product or an opportunity that when you see X, you don't want to invest, right? So like you see maybe it's something like when we're looking at an e-commerce play and it is something that Amazon does have, but maybe they don't do well. So like dental supply is one that comes to mind, right? So Amazon does not sell much of that, meaning products to dentists themselves. And so there are a couple of e-commerce sites that are emerging in that space that are trying to, do a better job of that. Like if you were looking at that deal, for example, would just the fact that it's something that Amazon could pivot into, therefore we're not interested. Like, do you have any heuristics that you can think of that are kind of, I don't want to say deal breakers, because I'm sure nothing in and of itself is a deal breaker, but are big red flags?
Yeah, I've seen that, call it a center of universe, where I'm any particular opportunity, the center of all the universe, everything else connected to them, and you're the best thing that come to connect everybody else. There are opportunities like that. We want to be the Salesforce system of record for everything, but in the technology space in particular, it's pretty hard to accomplish. And also, that may make sense from a long-term strategy standpoint, but doesn't really explain how do you enter the market to begin with. So that's one kind of a reflect to me as an indication of the entrepreneur's mindset in terms of how they see the world, with everybody else is revolving around them.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. It's a little bit tougher I think it's tough to build a team and a business from that mindset perspective. And the second thing, it's not so much a chart, but whenever people say, I'm win because of a better technology, they need to do a little more customer discovery. I remember Tim Kopp said this before, even though, he comes from a very successful technology background in the marketing and sales world. You can have the best technology, but essentially people don't buy technology. People buy from people.
Yeah, history is littered with better technology that never made it.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are the two glaring ones that I can think of.
This episode is brought to you by Full Stack PEO. Most founders start companies because they figured out a better way to solve a problem or serve a need, not because they love tracking payroll, filling out compliance forms, and explaining employee benefits packages. And yet, all that stuff still has to be done. That's why there's Full Stack PEO. Full Stack PEO specializes in turnkey HR for emerging companies, not just those core services, but advice and expertise that help founders maximize employee potential. Curious? Find out more at fullstackpeo.com.
Maybe some quicker questions or more fun questions. When you reflect back on pitches that you hear, give me maybe the most awkward moment in a pitch in the last 8 years?
Yeah, the most awkward one for me, at least I feel awkward. I'm not sure how the entrepreneurs feel, actually. The ones that we get entrepreneurs start talking, spend so much time on the problem as well as the technology at the beginning. Literally went on for probably half an hour, 45 minutes. One case, probably over an hour. The monologue. Nobody was jumping in and interacting. I'm sure we all read blogs, and I believe it because I was the receiving end of it. The first 5 minutes is so critical to capture people's attention. When you are pitching in the room and you're not seeing the reaction from the audience, questions should be popping up in your mind. Are they engaged? Are they interested? Right? When you went on and on for 35 to an hour, 35 minutes to an hour without any engagement from the audience, it's not a good sign.
Yeah. How have you seen entrepreneurs capture attention very quickly in the first 5 minutes? Do you have some examples of where you've seen that particularly well done, where it's like, no, I'm sitting up straighter. I'm super engaged. Like, what were they doing that made you sit up straighter and really lean in?
Yeah. The ones that really got our attention are the ones, the entrepreneurs bring their team. And we always start with around the table introductions. So when they're bringing their senior team, and in a way, I understand there's a difference in style in when you're engaging in conversations or communications, but we can hear people's passion and excitement in their own voice. I think that naturally get people a little more leaning in, says, hey, they're all really excited versus this monologue going on about the technology. So your voice and your tone, you bring your team, everybody's excited and the passion. First thing you want to see is this team passionate about the problem they're solving. You can hear the passion in the voice. That really kind of sets a tone. And two, once you're done selling your team, make sure you do sell your team, because that is the most important thing we look at, I think, at our stage. And two, once you got some traction, whether it's customer interviews or prospective customers, pre-sold prospective customers, or you have a growth traction beats everything else, right? Even though I can tell you that so many times I've gone through pitches, the entrepreneurs have actually done customer interviews, but they don't bring it up in the entire conversation. And I had to ask the question, so have you done customer interviews? And we've done 100. That's great. Tell us about the customer interviews. What did you learn?
Yeah.
Exactly. Again, team and customer is what I got. I was the most excited.
Team and customer.
Yeah.
What are some compelling ways that you've seen entrepreneurs package that customer story, whether it's personas, profiles, interview data, analysis data? Like, are there any like particularly innovative ways where you've seen somebody present that data and you're like, whoa, okay, these guys have spent 10,000 hours doing this. Like, that's amazing. Or is it the opposite? Is it more a story? Is like the anecdotal, I'm going to tell you a story about my customer, which is reflective of the real customer, but it's going to maybe tie into the emotion and the pain they feel. Is it more like, is a story a better way to go?
Great question. That's a really great question, because most of the time, especially when sales, especially the sales process is not repeatable yet and customer traction is limited, because that's the stage of a company, or
Right.
pre-customer buy. That's the stage of company that we deal with the most. Most of the time, as I reflect on this, entrepreneurs like to tell stories, referenceable customers, making the emotional connection why people are buying. Right, that makes all the sense. That kind of at least gets me halfway there. I don't remember the last time somebody pre-packaged a really nice customer metrics or the customer information. I mean, they might show the pipeline, they might show the CAC, they might show the LTV.
It's interesting because while you're talking about this, I'm thinking about ways I could have done that better. I'm thinking about ways that like
now I'm kind of amazed how
little attention
attention that has been paid to the to the tech. And maybe entrepreneur thinking those will come out through the diligence process, but even in the presentation stage, I mean, someone would ask those questions if they're not presenting it, but in the actual deck. I can't remember one deck, but it didn't kind of presented to us, but it was more getting ready to pitch for Series B, and then really kind of show the chart of CAC and LTV ratio and how do they different channel performance and churn, all that kind of good stuff you expect to see that stage. But at the early revenue stage, most folks they want to show the best they could have done was showing the pipeline, trying to tell the pipeline story with some anecdotes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of one of our startups, Waterly, sells to small municipalities. It's for EPA reporting for water treatment. Super exciting space, let me tell you. And one of the awesome things about that business is every single utility manager for every city is listed on a website with their phone number, email. Like so every single potential buyer for this product, you can scrape off the web, put in a spreadsheet or put in Salesforce or whatever you want and track it. And so what's interesting about that business is we of course have that data, and then we segmented it based on the population size of the city, which gives you an idea of complexity, right? Like into our small, medium, large customers. And so we have all of this data. And of course, this is probably the only product that I've worked on where I've seen that kind of like upfront definition of like, this is the total universe of people we could sell to. There are not more. Like it's not like if you go on LinkedIn and you look for this job title, it's like, well, that's probably like 2/3 or maybe 1/3 of the people. You know what I mean? Like, but no, it's like, this is it. Like, and if you strike out on these 700 for the state of Illinois, there's not more. Like that's it. Right.
Yeah.
So then we went to the next level. Some of the folks on the team have started to pull like demographic data because you can start to correlate. Like, because I have the person's name, maybe you can go to LinkedIn and you can start to see like which ones are older or younger, who's been in their job longer, thus they might feel the pain more, but not too long because then they're established in their ways and they don't want to change. And like, start to pull that kind of profile information. So in the sales cycle, we can decide, all right, where's the best target of opportunity where we're going to get the shorter sales cycle. Not that we won't sell to the other folks, but we need quick wins, right? Because we need revenue.
Yep.
It's kind of interesting how we've not done that for almost any other product.
Right. It's just most of the stuff go to market. So we're going to go to trade shows. Okay. Everybody's going to the trade show. And do we have a differentiated marketing strategy? Yeah. It's interesting.
All right. Favorite investment that you've made maybe in the last couple of years that you're really excited about? And you can name them explicitly or not. The once you've got that in your head, I'd love to know why. Like, what about that made it exciting or is keeping it exciting as you continue to reflect on it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, disclaimer. We love our kids equally.
Yes.
So it's no
of course.
favor. My personal, well, I'm a little biased because I'm personally involved in this, so I have some emotional investment in this particular one, but I love an underdog story. This one, it is Springbok, the one I'm talking about. Is a little bit is a underdog story in the sense that the two co-founders, they did not come from, in India we call it the premier technology pedigree. They did not come from ExactTarget. They did not come from a Primo. They did not come from Interact Intelligence or ENG's list. Well, Phil Daniels has a little bit ExactTarget interactions, but not in a high-level operating sense. So, but they identified a pain point in the marketplace. They continue to. I still remember the early days when they start selling reports.
Yeah.
And then that led to the software idea, and then they persisted, and they were working on go-to-market. They were working on recruiting the talent, given the fact that neither of them had the ExactTarget halo effect around their own credibility. But they were focused, and they're not afraid to knock on doors and try different things, and they're not afraid to push back when some investors, maybe including us at the time, questioned their go-to-market strategy, channel versus not channel, why it makes sense, and who we're competing with. And they did it. There were some early tough days in terms of cash flow. All the startup do, but they persisted, and they got the Lewis and Clark from St. Louis invested in A round, end of last summer. They started, they give them credit. Phil and Rod both asked the question, why can't we be like the West Coast firms and go and raise 20 million, 15 to 20 million Series B? I remember this is on the heels, barely 12 months after the 4 million Series A we closed. And then the revenue is getting there. We're just setting out, just recruited sales team. They're performing, but still in the Midwest conservative, we're thinking there's still some kinks that need to be worked out before we go out and shop to the coastal VCs. I remember my first reaction was, I don't think this is doable. And they did it, and then they went out and did their work, and they persisted. Again, I remember also when we were reviewing the deck, one of the things the board had to talk through in terms of be ready to help think through the specific, how do we respond to that question as you look at the founding team, you look at the top level team. None of them have exited the companies in the past. Technology companies in the past. It would be easy for somebody like Scott Dorsey and Tim Kopp to raise 20 million, right?
Right.
Oh, easier. I wouldn't say it's easy. But for Rod and Phil and the team that we had back then, it was a little bit tougher story to tell, but they did a really nice job and they persisted. And we I could not believe they got the job done. So that was my favorite.
That's awesome.
Underdog story. But they're not underdog anymore. They're in the race to become the next health analytics firm that's going to solve hopefully a big pain point in the marketplace.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, last question, and then I'll let you go. What are some of the trends that you're seeing that have you excited, whether they're technology trends or business model trends? What are some of the deals that when they pop up on your radar, you're kind of like, oh yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing this pitch or seeing more of this?
Our investment activity has been so local, even though we try to look at a national trends when we make our investment decisions. But I think just for the community standpoint, I think what started getting me really excited is the fact that we have so much software expertise that can be very parable to take on the data analytics opportunities. Data and AI was a fad for a while, and everybody's waiting to see how that's actually going to impact our lives. But there's so much opportunities in the marketplace. And
are you telling me you're not wowed by the chatbots that you interact with online?
Actually, I was wowed when my 11-year-old said, "Alexa, you're amazing," to Alexa, and Alexa responded by saying, "Really? You really think so? Thank you."
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, that was. And I think that it's not so much. The difference to me this time around is not so much, there's so much data analytics opportunities out there, but we as a community fully have a good foundational talent base to capture that. And we're seeing more and more, it's no longer just workflow software. It's how we're going to leverage the data that's generated from the workflow software to make a bigger impact on the business productivity. And then we see that evolution even in some of our portfolio companies if that's not their initial kind of business thesis.
Got it. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Kelly.
I really
Mike,
enjoyed it.
This is great. Thanks for the opportunity.
If you're thinking of launching a SaaS product, Startup Competitors can provide data on your closest competitors, survey potential users, or provide other product validation services. Learn more at startupcompetitors.com.